Welcome to the Public Works Nerds Podcast with Mark and Mike.
Today we're here with John Gorder and Russ Matthys from the City of Eagan. John, could you start us out just telling a little bit about your background?
All right. Thanks, Mike. Glad to be here. Graduated from North Dakota State University a long time ago.
Too many bison around here.
Oh, yeah.
Started working with Bonestro Consulting in 1988, 7 years there. Moved on to the City of Eagan as a design development engineer. Transitioned into the assistant city engineer position, and then into the city engineer position about 11 years ago. So been with the city 28 years or so, and it's been a great place to work, and happy to be there.
Okay. Russ, a little bit about your background?
Sure, Mike, and Mark as well. Thanks for having us. It's fun to be here. So I'm a jackrabbit. Went to North Dakota State.
Wow.
Yeah, Johnny and
One of the rare ones.
Yeah, we could talk football this year.
We have some bets.
For the first time in a long time. So I actually started out in Los Angeles. I worked at Los Angeles County Public Works. There's like a core of about half a dozen of us in the metro area that did similarly, that all came back to Minnesota. So I only worked there for a year, worked for a couple consulting firms out there as well, but for a short period of time. Within 3 years, I was back in Minnesota, fell in love with the Minnesota girl, and she got me back to Minnesota. So worked for a variety of cities at that point then. I worked for Farmington, I worked for Maplewood, and then I found my way to Eagan, thankfully. Been there about 26 years. I started originally as a city engineer, and then 11 years ago, similar to John's story, became a public works director. So it's been a fun transition. Eagan's just been a wonderful place to be. Lots of opportunities. A lot of it's location, but it's the people there too has been a big part of it. So thankful that we've been able to be there, and that I've had an awesome partner like Johnny for such a long time.
Yeah, and I just want to say, and I cut you off there, Mike, but when I was thinking about when we were starting this up and we were thinking about guests, I thought, hey, let's early on in this podcast journey, let's bring in a couple of award-winning engineers in our metro area, and I want to call that out. I think in the last 12 months. The City of Eagan's been pretty well represented in that, with Russ, you winning the Director of the Year for the local APWA chapter, and John, you winning the Engineer of the Year for our City Engineers Association of Minnesota. And so I just wanted to highlight that. Congratulations to both of you, very well deserved. I mean, Eagan's always been on the forefront of things, and just been really well managed and run community as I look at it from the outside. And you guys have a lot of really interesting stuff happening in Eagan with the Vikings training facility there now, and just a lot of good development and such down there. So
for our listeners outside of Minnesota, can you put Eagan in a little context?
Sure. Eagan's in southeast metro. It's across the river from the airport. So when I talk about location, that's a big part of it. And then the freeway system. We've got 494 on our north boundary, 35E cuts through diagonally, through Eagan, and Cedar Avenue Freeway on the west side. So it's northern part of Dakota County, right on the Minnesota River.
What's the population?
Population is about 68,000, right now. And I would say our workforce is, it was low 60s. It's down maybe about 55,000 during the day. So there's a lot of the 68,000 that work in Eagan, but, I would say we get up 100,000 plus folks, driving in and through Eagan every day.
Not counting all the people working from home.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And what's the square area of
32?
Yeah, 32 square miles.
Okay.
And as you mentioned, Mark, really a mix of commercial and residential development, and the opportunity to work on a lot of unique and special projects and developments through the years, with the Outlet Mall redevelopment, the Viking Lakes, a few large other commercial retail developments, and makes it fun and interesting to come to work every day, and including the people that we work with.
Yeah, and still growing.
It's still growing. And facing some redevelopment challenges with some of our corporate campuses as well, and that'll play into some of our asset management discussion later on.
And then just before we get into the asset management topic, we just touch on the size of your public works department, the workforce. How many guys you have, and that, just so people can kind of get an idea of the size of the department.
Yeah. So in public works, public works consists of engineering. It consists of streets and fleet, and then utilities, which is water, sanitary sewer, and storm sewer, and then water quality, or surface water, water resources. We do have a lot of GIS folks within the mix there, and
Good.
then for 3.5 years we've had an asset management coordinator. So about 55, 60 total,
Great.
and then including seasonals, we get up to 75. So.
Okay. Well, today we wanted to kind of dive into asset management's a huge topic. I assume we're going to have several episodes on asset management, but today we wanted to cover a little bit the bigger picture and the journey you've been on at Eagan. You've been on the forefront and been doing it a long time. So kind of, can you tell us, you've both been working on it for so long, kind of tell us that journey. What does that 25-year journey look like?
Yeah, and what has asset management meant for you guys over the course of that journey?
Okay, I guess I'll start, and I'm going to hand it off to John pretty quick. But asset management is basically addressing or taking care of all the stuff that you have. And what we try and do is try and get the biggest bang for our buck out of the assets, the public assets that we're responsible for. And so our journey really started in the pavement realm with our roads. And so I'll let John address kind of the history of that.
Yeah, we have to thank our predecessors at the city, namely Tom Colbert, our former public works director, who had the foresight to start an asset management program specifically for the pavement management in the city. That started back in 1990. He had the wherewithal to think ahead on how we're gonna manage this large asset that developed in the 80s and 90s. All the pavement and the development that was essentially given to us through development, and it's really been a good process through the years. We've essentially evolved into a mill and overlay program throughout our streets. We haven't gotten to the reconstruct portion yet, but that's where it all started, was that initial pavement management program, working with ICON and creating our CIP for street improvements through the years.
So as a part of the ICON program, did you have that company come out and do the pavement surveys and that? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They initially provided the ratings and the software to manage the pavement, and we've since taken it on to do the ratings through the years, and we rate a third of the city every year, and every street in the 5-year CIP every year as well.
How do you do just 30 seconds? How do you do the rating?
The ratings is still a visual survey.
Yeah.
We haven't morphed into more of a AI or
digital camera or video type of thing.
Yeah, drive through. We have a technician from the streets department that rates the pavement 1/3 every year, and does a great job and creates a great system.
Good. What's your average PCI?
Our goal average PCI is 75 or above.
Mm-hmm. Hot off the press, Johnny. I just got this.
Oh, are we switching?
72.8.
Oh,
which is an enhancement from last year. Last year we were 71.4, I think. So
yeah,
we're getting closer to 75.
Okay.
So
when do you think you'll hit your goal?
Well, we were above our goal for much of our program, but I don't know when we went down. I could check. We're finishing up our CIP right now. In fact, I got to finish my memo today. So I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting, because of the size of our program and just the difference, our improvements make. I was surprised that we jumped a little over a point, in this past year. So, but I'll be very honest with you. 75 isn't necessarily I don't know that 75 is the perfect number.
Right. Is that really the right answer?
Yeah,
right?
We don't know that it is. Maybe 70 is the right answer, because at 72, you probably think your streets are in pretty good conditions.
Right.
And the really important thing is, what do your residents think?
Yes.
And your council,
Yep. And to that point, Mark, I'll give us a quick little shout out, but this winter was an interesting winter. And a lot of folks talked a lot about road conditions this spring, and I would tell you that Eagan's road conditions were pretty darn good. And so I use that as my best judgment or guide. It's whether or not we hit 75. Yeah.
And a little detail on that too. We're facing a lot of challenges on our collector roadways. We used to think we'd be able to get 20 years out of a mill and overlay, but we're experiencing that to meet that condition index, we're likely going to more of a 15-year cycle on those overlays.
I have a lot more questions I would love to explore about pavement management and seal coats and overlays and all that. But let's get back to the asset management component. So you started with pavements is really your foray into a detailed asset management system, and then how did that evolve?
Well, we've been doing it for 33 years now, and as I became Public Works Director 11 years ago, I started to see a lot more than just the street projects. From the engineering perspective, that was a lot of what I focused on. And for the most part, the way, I don't remember if we did this before or not, but the street improvements would kind of lead the CIP. Our capital improvement plan started with the Pavement Management Program. And so, and then also our asset policy started at the same time too. So there was a lot of big things that happened as a result of the Pavement Management Program getting started. So I always felt pretty good about the Pavement Management Program. And oftentimes it's like, well, we got to do something like this for the utilities as well. And it's pretty obvious. Pavement's easy. You can walk it, you can touch it, you can feel it.
Well, the lifespan is shorter on the pavement than a water main or a sewer too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now we have been doing a pretty good job in our history on televising our sanitary sewers. And so I felt pretty good about our ability to rate the conditions of the sanitary sewer pipes. We could do that with storm sewer. We weren't at the point. Water main's a whole different other story. But yeah, the more success and the support of our council. Our council is so supportive of our pavement management program. They've seen the success of it. We started out, and none of them were on the council 30 years ago, but a lot of them have been on the council for 20 plus years. Okay. And so they've seen that when we have public hearings, because we do special assessments, we don't have very many people show up. And oftentimes, I'm just doing memos this morning before I came here on public hearings, and it was like, nobody showed up for this neighborhood meeting. We've had no objections to these assessments. And I'm talking about 200, 300, 600 people involved in these various projects. And to them, that just, for an elected official, and you don't have anybody in front of you yelling at you because, your things are too expensive or you did something wrong. And, that's huge. And so they've just really bought into, and appropriately so, bought into the success of the pavement management program. And so it's easy to go take something like that they're familiar with and say, hey, we want to do the same thing with utilities. And the thing that, I started realizing with utilities is we were fairly new. And to your point that you made earlier, Mark, utilities hopefully are going to last a lot longer than the streets are, but eventually you're going to have to do something.
Right.
And no different than pavement. Well, maybe something should be maintaining it. And we've had a lining program. I mean, with the Met Council's encouragement, with I&I, we've always had a pretty good lining program. We've probably quadrupled the amount of mileage that we line pipes now. We started out with maybe half a mile. Now we're up to about 2 miles a year of typically still clay pipe. Even in Eagan, we've got some clay pipe.
Oh.
But
and I'm just going to pause button there just for our national listeners. So our MPO, the Metropolitan Council here, also manages the wastewater treatment plants for the metro area. And so they actually have a really good, well-funded, generally through bonding dollars, program to help fund lining sewers to get rid of that inflow and infiltration issue, which then saves them a lot of money on treating that water. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick for those that were listening nationally.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And if you are a local community in the Twin Cities area and you haven't utilized the funding that the Met Council provides for those types of projects, do it. I mean, and they're very helpful. Met Council staff is wonderful to work with. So, Mike, were you going to say something?
Yeah, to circle back to talking about your city council and not much opposition of any to these neighborhood mill and overlay projects, I just want to put a kind of exclamation point as I understand it. It's because this has been a 30-year program and policy and data-driven and well-documented and no surprises. Is that why you think there's just nobody showing up to these public hearings?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. I think you nailed it on the head. So, we'll have 1,000 to 1,500 properties typically assessed on a yearly basis with our pavement management program right now. And if we have 3 to 6 people,
What's the average assessment?
show up. Average assessment, we assess half the cost of the bituminous. So we don't, if there's any curb improvements or replacement, if there's any utility work, we don't assess for any of that. If they have typically in commercial, industrial, if they have a brand new concrete apron, which we kind of have a standard for in town, they have to pay 100% of those costs. But typically for your residential single family assessment, John, we're looking at anywhere from $750 to $1,500, maybe $2,000.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's I might be moving to Eagan.
Wow. It's low. And our council has supported, city subsidizing at least a portion of it, but they like to have the assessment still in the game. So folks have
skin in the game.
Folks have some buy-in in the whole thing.
So then, go ahead, John. What are you going to say?
I was just going to talk about how the utilities asset management and water resources asset management kind of evolved out of the pavement management program too. It was a challenge that Tom Colbert and Russ put to us when we do go into a neighborhood on a pavement management street improvement project. Look holistically at all the infrastructure in the neighborhood and challenged us to fix everything for the next 20 years so we don't have to go back into a neighborhood 2, 3, 10 years later even to impact that neighborhood.
Yeah, that's a great point, John. And that's all about the customer impact, and people don't care what the construction, people care, but people aren't concerned about what the specific activities are that the construction are doing. They just know it impacts them. So if we could combine all the activities that need to be done at one time, hallelujah, that's fewer birthday parties or weddings or
graduation parties.
Yeah, exactly. That you're impacting. So and even from a business perspective, and I think we've all learned this, but I did early on, and I continue to see it time and time again. No matter how careful we are with construction work going on in business commercial areas. And even if we leave the streets open, but there's still construction activity, there's an impact. There's an impact on all those businesses, and we're trying to limit that. So, as far as with the utility stuff, it's really, I guess, we kind of went into it not necessarily knowing what there all was out there, to help us, to guide us through setting up a program. And we definitely had the Pavement Management Program as a great example, but it's different and it's underground and it's out of sight. So, and even on the televising, that doesn't necessarily tell you everything. So,
and you're not televising water main,
and we're not televising water main, so, and we're not televising storm sewer. Right. So it's like, okay, what do we do with that? And yet, we've had, and it's not just, we knew that age was coming. So I think the big motivator for me was our utility superintendent, John Eaton, went and did a 100-year projection, 100-year forecast on what was going to be the replacement need. So he just took national standards for reinforced concrete pipe, polyvinyl chloride, PVC, and then ductile iron pipe for water main, because those are the main characters when it comes to our utilities. And he projected out, a standard life expectancy. And there was this huge tidal wave that was, of costs that we were anticipating within that 100-year period. And so,
and probably within like a pretty narrow band too.
Well, and that's for context narrow, because Eagan is a fast-growing suburb. Over our careers, has quadrupled. I don't know what the rate of growth, but a lot of your infrastructure was built in a pretty small window of time. And all that's going to come due at the same time.
Absolutely, Mike. And so I would say, the two big things, we had 2 bridges across the Minnesota River that were constructed and completed or upgraded, about the same time. We went from a 2-lane Cedar Avenue freeway to a 6-lane, and then 494, the interstate across the Minnesota River as well. Both early 80s, 83-ish, and so mid-80s through mid to late 90s. Yeah, that's where we had a lot of growth going on. And so, to your point, or the point you're making is, it's a fairly narrow band of all these replacements that need to happen, or probably likely are going to need to happen. And so, and I've been sharing this a lot more, and this has been more of a revelation lately. But when you think about it, for cities, most of the infrastructure that we have was paid for by a developer, and those developers got reimbursed by the homeowners. Yep. I want to be clear about that. But it wasn't the city that was financing those original assets, public assets. And so we didn't really make a plan to do anything with them. For the Pavement Management Program, that was revolutionary thinking, for Tom Colbert and others, back in the late 80s and 1990 when they implemented it. So the reality is that it's all going to have to be replaced. And most of us aren't planning for that replacement. And so John did this projection for 100 years. And I said, we got to take this to the council, and it's like, well, 100 years is going to be a little bit big to swallow. Let's get it down to 50, years. And that's more of a realistic approach. Most of us, hopefully, not all of us are going to be alive in 50 years, but at least there's going to be, there's folks that we're having conversations with that could, 50 years, I can see that. So when we did that, again, we just used the standard life expectancies. It captured that big tsunami, that was on its way, and so that. When we look at us, and I'm gonna use another city's number, but I have not specifically done all the math, but roughly I calculate that we've got about $1 billion worth of public infrastructure. Wow. When you look at all our underground pipes and stuff, our facilities, our streets and stuff like that. So when I suggested to the council that, hey, if we can do anything to try and get a longer life or a better bang for our tax dollars or our utility rates to address $1 billion worth of stuff, even if I can make 1% of a difference, that's huge, know. And so that was, that was easy buy-in. People could see that, do that math pretty quick. So we went and did this evaluation, and we did what projection. We worked with a consultant that helped us, and so we had projections for what costs were going to be, and I've got some numbers, but we were looking at, based on if we would continue our current utility rates, and that's how we finance for the most part now because we don't have developers coming in as much. But if we continued our current utility rates, quickly within the next 10 years, I think we were going to have costs that were going to be maybe 4 or 5 times what the revenue was we were bringing in with our utility rates. Now, I think our projections were maybe a little conservative, but whether it's 10 years or whether it's 20 years, and then as you carry that out to the end of the 50 years, I mean, we were looking at significant gap between what we were going to need for making all those replacements or paying for all those replacements and what we were actually generating. And so they were quick to appreciate that. And then we hired a separate, or we worked with our finance folks. And I said, our engineers can do the financial evaluation, but I want you guys, and I honestly feel we're doing all this for our financial purposes. It's all about the financial health of the community. And so our finance folks selected their own consultant and somebody this council was familiar with. And so they reviewed what we did, and then they did a utility rate study, and they proposed a significant increase in our utility rates, but they also proposed an infrastructure fee. And so they wanted to, not that didn't increase the specific, water rate or sewer rate or storm sewer rate as much, because they offset it a little bit with this infrastructure fee. And the infrastructure fee was kind of a replacement for the developers, contributions and stuff, was the way it was seen, and kind of more of a almost like maybe a little bit like for our streets. We have a major street fund, and we talked about the special assessments. Whatever's not assessed, the major street fund covers that. So I think the infrastructure fee kind of acts in essence as a
so who pays that infrastructure fee? Is that new developments charged at the time of construction, or is that every resident is paying an annual fee?
That's every resident. So that's a new fee on their utility bill.
Oh, interesting.
So they are paying it, but it's designated. It can be used for water, sanitary sewer, or storm sewer.
Okay.
So,
but not streets.
Not street. No.
That's a different conversation.
That's a different conversation.
Hey everyone, just wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Bolton & Mink, who are producing this podcast for us.
At Bolton & Mink, we believe all people should live in a safe, sustainable, and beautiful community. We promise every client 2 things. We'll work hard for you, and we'll do a good job. We take a personal interest in the work being done around us. And at the end of the day, we're real people offering real solutions.
You have pavement management, you have the utilities, you're building up the asset management. Is it the same software package? How are you logging all of this data? What's the mechanism here? And maybe how has that evolved?
Well, that's a great question. So when I got the budget team and the previous city administrator to approve a new asset management coordinator, it was tied together with asset management software. And I threw a number out there. There's all kinds of opportunities. And, we had been using a software for a number of years, or at least 10 years, with our GIS folks. And I'll talk more about GIS. We've had GIS going on in Eagan for 27 years. We still have the same person who started with our GIS as our GIS coordinator for the city. Awesome. I'll
give a shout out to her.
Yeah, Tammy Mattio is a superstar, she's won awards like John as well, and statewide awards, and they've even been recognized by Esri internationally. I mean, we've got. I'll put up our GIS team against anybody. So
might get some challenges on that, but let's go. Let's go.
I'll take them. They're ready. They can handle it. Where was I going with this? Help me out, Mike.
So you had the idea, you had the asset management,
GIS.
you had the coordinator position approved, you had you knew it was tied to the software.
Thank you.
Where do we go?
Thank you, Mark. So, but I didn't have a name necessarily. We had tried this. We had utilized a previous GIS software that worked together with Esri. Esri's, with ArcCAD, and ArcMap and all that. And it worked, but we didn't utilize the full package of it. And so one of the things I did when I became director was, it's like, we're paying how much a year for this? I think it was a $50,000 annual fee. What are we doing with it? And we were doing a little bit of work order management, and that was it. I mean, and this software was powerful. I mean, it was a powerful software, but we weren't utilizing it. And so I said, we got to stop until we figure out what we're doing. So part of the deal with when I offered up the asset management coordinator and the software to go along with it was to evaluate. That asset management coordinator was going to evaluate software, including the one we'd gotten rid of and whatever else was out there. And I was done looking. I mean, I'd gone to all the conferences, and John's going, come on, Russ, let's go. We got to go do something else, besides walk around and talk to asset management people. But so that's one of the things she did. I think probably is a little after she'd been here a full year. And we had a team that was represented by folks from multiple departments in the city, and I was actively involved with that. And I was telling John on the way here, we literally had the money in the outstretched palm of this software provider, is a different one. And we pulled it back because we just didn't think that was in our best interest to do. And what we did is we went with no software, no new software.
That consultant couldn't provide a comprehensive one-size-fits-all.
Not perfectly for us. And I think that's and if you guys have worked with software vendors before, when it gets down to it, everybody who's created something has created it based on their own experience and what they've worked with.
Or one other city's experience or something.
Yeah. And so, whereas I think we do public works there, everybody else is I talk to folks in the cities. There's maybe two other communities in the Twin Cities that are really close comparison to how we do public works. And, we all think what we do is the way it's done everywhere, but it's not necessarily. Yeah. So we kind of found that with the software too. And it's like, I like what this does in this area, but man, I don't like this, this part of it. So, and the other thing that we had done, and we had made this decision, and I'd literally made this decision, I don't know, 5 years beforehand. And it was like, we have this superstar GIS team, and they started doing, utilizing Esri, and Esri again was ArcMap, ArcCAD, all that stuff. Esri really opened their doors and said, here's our program. We're not going to charge you a bunch of added fees for doing extra tag on things. You guys, whatever you can do with everything we have, you do it. Share with us what you're doing. Let's have this communication and this flow of information back and forth. But that's what our staff started doing. They started fully utilizing Esri. They did hire some consultants to help them who really understood Esri to help us even develop it more. But they started doing stuff and working with our frontline folks and said, what are you comfortable with working? What works best for you? What do you like? And I said, this is going to be a problem when we decide to actually buy a software program, because it's not going to be just like what our folks like. Yep. But okay, I'm okay with right now. Let's do this. And so we started doing that. Everybody was buying into it. We were getting great information, and it was heavily utilized. So we were going from, everything being written down on paper, and when someone goes out to replace a water meter or do an I&I inspection and stuff like that, to all of a sudden it was all being done on their smartphone. Right. And we had pictures on there. Well, here's what a pressure reducing valve should look like in, tied to this person's irrigation system or whatever. And they would say, yep, it's that one. And they'd click on that, and then they'd write notes on there if there was something different. And all of a sudden, we're getting rid of 1,000 pages of paper, and everything's electronic, and everybody was buying into it, and they really liked it, and they saw the benefits of it. And so that really weighed heavily into our final decision to not go with an asset management software program because of what our folks were doing internally, and they continue to do things like that internally. And so our asset management program is Esri. That's our software.
And the people.
And the people and the consultants that we use with it. And that's kind of where we're going. And asset management, I'm the asset management committee chair for the American Public Works Association, Minnesota chapter. And what we're doing, what our message is, hey, we all do asset management, but it's all
whether you call it that or not. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And whether you're making the choices in your head, or you're writing them down on a piece of paper, or maybe you're using Excel as a spreadsheet. Or maybe you got a fancy software program that works well for you, and some people do. We're all doing it in different ways. I mean, that's what we do as Public Works. We manage assets, and so what we're trying to do is just encourage people to manage a little bit better. Right. Make it a little bit more efficient.
So, are you able to get analytics out of this way you're going about it, or is this more of just a database that then when you have questions, you're dipping your toes into the database, or has your team been able to build any kind of dashboards or templates that help inform your CIP and things like that?
So we've been doing the analytical aspects are loud and clear with the streets, and that's easy. Okay. And we want to try and get there to utilities, but where we're at, for water main, where's our water main breaks? I mean, that's what we're doing, and that's, I think, most people.
Yeah, you're reactionary.
That's how they do it, know.
Yeah. What's the pipe material? How old is it, and where the water main breaks?
Exactly. Yep. And so, but what we're doing now, and this is like current right now today. We've got a neighborhood that I think the utilities were put in 1965 to 1969. So they're coming up, on some of their life expectancies. And so we are going to go into that neighborhood this summer. We're going to televise all the sanitary sewer. We've done it in the past, but we're going to televise it current now this summer. We're going to televise all our storm sewer, which has never been done. And then we're going to dig up pothole portions of our water main, and as well as some of our structures or manhole structures and catch basins and stuff like that. And we're going to do an evaluation and working with the consultant and try and do an evaluation on where that pipe is. And then we're going to try and use that then as, okay, well, here's what the standards say, but here's what our experience is in this one neighborhood.
And you got to take into account soil conditions and this, that, and the other too. With that. But that allows you to do that kind of your own personal lifespan of those, the actual, I'm blanking on the word.
The Eagan lifespan or whatever.
But that's where you talk about
performance. What's the actual performance of the pipe?
But that 1% on $1 billion asset, being able to tune in your localized conditions, that's where you can get that 1 or 2% versus just going off the national standards.
But I think it's important. We need to share that information with people locally and nationally, because their situation might be similar as well. Just to give another data point for folks as they're evaluating their utility.
I found throughout the industry that we have these big, giant reams of data and standards, but you dig back, and you realize how small of a data sample all of these standards are based on, and how sometimes they're 30, 40 years old too. So,
just a best guess from industry people too.
So, getting back to, it's really interesting that you guys decided that you're going to kind of do your own custom asset management system, which is great. And you've got the staff to do that. And obviously not every agency is going to have that, the resources or the staff to do that. But, getting back to kind of the cost side of it, if you were spending, and I would say, given what we were doing in Roseville and what I saw there, depending on the system you bought, that $50,000 to $60,000 number is about right for an annual maintenance contract. But let's say you were, rather than spending $50,000 to $60,000 on a software platform, what additional costs do you think you have doing your own personal that you wouldn't have had, if you had a software system?
Well, we are spending about $5,000 to $10,000 a year for the consultant assistance that we're getting. So that's probably not something I would get support for, if we bought a software program. Staff time, we are, and I don't necessarily have a number on that, but staff time, we've got staff's doing a lot more. They're in essence being the software creators, oftentimes. So now I think there's some benefit to that in ways as well, but there is a cost to that. Yep. We do have like we do as part of it. Oftentimes the counties will have the aerial topo map that's got the property information and stuff. We do our own, but it's a lot more. We got all the utility information on it and stuff too, and so that's about a that's about a $5,000 a year cost to maintain that as well. Now we'll work, and a lot of the aerial topos that we have are going to be from the county. Yep. But then we've got all our GIS system. We can go in and you can this morning clicked on a pipe. You know what the size is and what the material is. But then I can also pull up the original plan from that and have the as-built, for that, and any easements, any easement documents, stuff like that as well. So, so there's some additional cost with that.
Do you, through that system, your own kind of personal property information system, do you have your tie cards linked to those parcels and everything else like that? Okay.
And that's how we do the notifications, for our public hearings and stuff like that.
Cool.
So those are some additional costs that we have that we probably wouldn't have necessarily. I think we started, and what do we call it, John? That's the MapEd. I guess MapEd is our current map that I'm describing, or smart map, but we started that a long time ago, and so that's part of the Eagan way, I guess. So even though we didn't get an asset management, even if we would have gotten an asset management program, we're probably still going to work on that and have these similar costs because folks in all kinds of other departments are utilizing that as well. So.
To that point, what about your parks department? That was a big thing when we brought in a new asset management system. One of the selling points of the council was that this was going to be, we weren't going to have a different system than a different department was going to. So we had to bring parks in, and get them to start thinking about asset management in that way too. What about Eagan's experience with that?
Well, it is a very good question. GIS started in Public Works and has gone out kind of citywide, but it's still 95% in Public Works. Tammy and I did a big study. Oh my goodness, it's 10 years ago because we're going to update it now to try and get everyone to see the benefit of GIS, and folks were seeing it they liked maps. I want a map like that. Give me that map. But they didn't necessarily understand what all was involved with it. Yep. We had a great study done, and then I took over on trying to sell it to everybody else, and had Tammy help me, and I didn't sell it too good.
Okay.
And so we didn't get a lot of support. So when we started going forth with the asset management effort, and before I got approval for the asset management coordinator, I did an asset management study. Again, we knew it was going to be GIS based, but I learned from the first effort that I'm going to hire someone to sell it to everybody else, or at least to educate everybody else. And so that was received much better. And everybody, there was a lot more recognition of the benefit that asset management could provide on a citywide basis. So again, I'm the one that's going out. Public Works is the one that's going out and making the request for the personnel and for the money for the software. And so asset management is initiated, starts in Public Works, but our asset management coordinator is having those discussions because, I got friends in other departments actually, and we talk. Really? Yeah, believe it or not. And so there are believers in other departments that are having conversations, and our GIS folks, our asset management folks are good to work with. They're fun people to work with, and they want to do the good stuff that they're doing for us, for others as well. And so we're having those conversations and we're getting the buy-in. So we're gonna redo this effort. It's 10 years. It's been 10 years since the first GIS effort. So we're gonna tie both the GIS and asset management, recognizing that GIS is our backbone, our central nervous system. It's our brains. It's everything to our asset management program. So just trying to get everybody to have a better understanding. We've had changes in our senior management team. We got a bunch of department heads that retired, and so we have new folks in place. So they're different than when I had this discussion 10 years ago, and even 7 or 8 years ago with asset management. So I believe that the folks in parks are going to recognize, and some already are. They're seeing the benefit of that. Try and help them understand that maybe they need to, from my perspective, maybe need to put in a little staffing, involvement,
a little funding as well,
and funding, and so. But I'm really, really strengthening our relationship with our finance folks, and again, like I said earlier. Honestly, asset management is so much about finance, and so finance is really buying in. And in fact, just in the last month, we've had some major connections on not that everything I see is exactly perfect and in the way the world should be, but it's like, okay, I think I get what you're saying now, and it's like, yeah, that makes sense. And we need to do that, even to the point of increasing the utility rates a little bit more than that utility rate study said, because, okay, our latest and greatest CIP is showing that, we're getting down a little lower than what they feel finance feels comfortable with as far as having cash in the bank.
Yeah.
So,
and I just want to jump in with just a couple of quick questions on the asset management topic before we move on to anything else. But one is, and I just wanted to make the point on, you talked a lot about, field staff entering data in and this, that, and the other. And I think that is one of one of the biggest benefits to an asset management system was the institutional knowledge. Like you touched on department heads retiring. Well, we've got a lot of maintenance staff retiring, industry-wide. And they're taking a lot of that institutional knowledge with them. And so we need to get that in that computer system. So when you do look at that valve, that it was repacked or whatever on a certain year, and what the maintenance history is on that. And if you don't have a good database system to keep, you don't know that.
Absolutely.
That data's going to be gone. But
absolutely.
Where do you think your asset management system or your program is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, do you really see it like this? I think we found our sweet spot. We're good with this. We can grow with this. Or do you see it like morphing or evolving?
Yeah, and also, are you using Esri for all your street signs? Are you using it for facilities? Are there fleet? Are there other modules, areas of the city?
So I'll answer the software question first. We use AssetWorks for our fleet.
Okay.
And AssetWorks is a very good asset management program, and it's one that can be utilized for more of the things that we've been talking about. And so we've looked at that a little bit. We got AssetWorks through a wonderful joint cooperative program with Scott County, I think it is. And so there's a number of cities that work together with Scott County, and I don't know if there's one other, maybe Dakota County's together with Scott County on this, but for $10,000 a year, I think we get AssetWorks, and I'm telling you, finance is so happy with what's happened as a result of our utilization of AssetWorks and the fleet folks that are doing it, Brian Thome and his crew, and Tim Plath encouraging and supporting that. So they're totally bought in. We're within pennies now of where parts costs, where we think what was actually used and what was actually spent, on stuff like that. Icon's another one, another software that works together with Esri. I think there's a decent potential, and I'll talk a little bit later about an AI effort we use with some software that, there are, with the way we're doing things with Esri's the the mother, board or whatever. But I think there's definitely, I see wisdom in having using other software programs when they work better for other things. Like for our water treatment plants, we've got a software program, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but that's something that works really good for that. And Esri's kind of evolving, and they're getting better as far as 3D and being able to do stuff within buildings. Because it's always been an address location, geographic location, and so that's been a little bit challenging when you get 3 stories worth of something on the same point. Where is it really? Right. Yeah. Right. So Esri's making improvements with that, but this other software we're using, that can be a part of it. Where we're going as far as are we going to stay where we're at? No. I'm really excited about where we're going. We're taking kind of like what we talked about before, where when we go into a neighborhood, we try and do everything at the same time. Yep. Well, we're taking our street pavement management program evaluations, and we're going to overlay that with our utility evaluations. And now, so it's not just like John talked about, every 20 years we'll come in and do something. Well, that's because our pavement management program is that we do something every 20 years. That's what that's based on. Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at, what's the life expectancy of those pipes? Yep. And when are they going to be due? Because, all right, and I get this is simple, but I'll just lay it out. When we replace a water main, we're tearing up the street most of the time, because our water main, our sanitary sewer, and our storm sewer is under our street. Yep. So we got to do some coordination here between tearing up and replacing streets and replacing our utilities. I don't want to go in and do we're trying to get streets to last 50, 60 years. I don't want to do a full street reconstruction at year 60, and then 15 years later we come and tear the street up to replace the sanitary sewer. Yeah, and we had that experience in Roseville. It was more and more our water main replacements were driving our street reconstruction projects than the other way around, because we had to replace these water mains. Gotcha. Yeah. See, we haven't had that experience because Eagan's so young. Yep. And so thankfully, we're able to do that. But so it's not going to be the 20-year schedule for a pavement management program that's going to guide the projects. It's going to be, what's going to make the best bang for our buck? And maybe there's a 75-year life expectancy on this RCP or that's guiding it. And, instead of doing a reconstruction in year 60 of our street, maybe we got to back up and look, so are we doing something different at year 40 or 50 where we're doing a recycle, where we're recycling all the bituminous, where we wouldn't usually do that. We do an overlay. Yep. But maybe we're recycling it, so we're extending that out beyond a reconstruction in 60, maybe we're getting a reconstruction in year 75 or 80, and that ties in nicely. So we're not going to hit it perfect, and we're going to continue to do evaluations like I described in the one neighborhood this summer. We're going to continue to do things like that as much as they make sense. I mean, it's expensive. We're looking at an $86,000 cost estimate to do this evaluation this summer in this neighborhood. I can't justify that, in every neighborhood, but we want to try and further refine that life expectancy in Eagan, depending upon the soils and the pipe materials and stuff, so that we can try and get as close as engineers can get, without going insane. What is that timing where we can mesh all that stuff together and it makes as much sense as possible? Again, everything's got different life expectancies. It's not all going to work out perfect, but maybe it's a combination of, we're lining the sanitary sewer so we don't have to tear that one up and replace it. Maybe even the water main we can line too.
Just a couple of things to add on where I think things are going in the next 5 to 10 years, how things are evolving on asset management. Just to add to Russ's thing, we're always looking for new technologies to evaluate our underground infrastructure as well. And then we're always on the lookout for those types of things. And you never know what's out there that might be coming. So we're always on the lookout for that. Second item I see as asset management evolving is, Russ mentioned this in a meeting a couple days ago that we were having on sustainability. Asset management is a sustainability effort. And we're always doing. We're always making sustainable efforts in our public infrastructure, whether it's using recycled material in pavement management or in street improvements, always looking for the best, longest life material to construct our infrastructure. And there's a possibility that asset management becoming a sustainability effort might help in our acquisition of funding and infrastructure management.
Yeah,
So,
and some of your goals towards those sustainability efforts as well.
absolutely. Yeah.
It's a good point. It's a good point.
So let's flip over to just a couple of rapid fire questions we close out the podcast with, just around technology. First of all, are there any kind of software programs or technology pieces of equipment you're big fans of, like you just over the last 5-10 years that have come out you couldn't imagine living without now that you've had it?
Back on the GIS, GPS side of things, we've discovered in Public Works EOS units that are field data collection units that hook onto your Apple. That's an Apple product, and they're. I'm not sure what the exact accuracy of it is, but
It's accurate.
they're
What is the product again?
EOS.
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 Okay.
Get 'em.
We'll get this.
Yeah.
Oh
We'll find a
We'll
link
get it
for
and get it in the show notes.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like a tenth of the cost of a large high quality GPS unit, but it provides almost that same level of accuracy.
Very close.
And it's been great for all of our engineering field technician staff to use. Our water resources staff uses it. Utilities, streets maintenance uses it as well.
Oh, good to know. That's great. And that obviously ties into the asset management system then too, of
Absolutely.
course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's easy to use. The frontline staff are using it. I'll throw out. I mentioned Esri before. Esri's been awesome. I mean, just their whole philosophy on here's everything we have. Do with it what you can and what you want. Tell us, share with us what you're doing. But wow, they've just really, and the enhancements that they've made. That's why we've been able to do stuff in house. I mean, comparatively, and I haven't looked recently, but I know we've got a good GIS staff and maybe a healthy GIS staff, but we've pieced that together. It's always been, most of the positions have been half clerical, half GIS, and we slowly work them to 90% GIS and 10th clerical. But seriously, we got regular folks that they're willing to try and do anything, and Esri really gives them the opportunity to maximize their skills and to maximize what we can do with that tool.
On the flip side, if I give you a magic wand and you could invent something, fix something right now, where you're like, man, I can't believe nobody's come up with this yet.
Water main is a condition evaluator for water main pipe. That would be.
Have you tried the acoustic?
So have we tried what?
The acoustic.
We done the acoustic a little bit. We did AI. We did do an AI thing with water main. It really, when we compared that to just water main breaks and the standard life, stuff. And we just didn't feel comfortable with what, I mean, it goes to the soils conditions. I mean, you can see what it does and what it's evaluating, but we didn't think it gave us much more. In fact, we thought maybe it's a little too conservative in some areas, and it's like, that's going to get expensive.
Okay.
So water main evaluation. I had a conversation with a young guy who's got something like a camera that can go in the water main pipe, but once you have to really drain it in order to get a good. I mean, it could go around all kinds of bends and stuff like that.
But you still have to have a point of entry for it.
You still have to have a point of entry for it. Yep. And then and I was saying, well, how about can we put it in there? Can I get it in a hydrant? Because it was almost to the point where you could get it into a hydrant and into it. But he says, the clarity with the water in there just isn't quite there yet. But So that's the one thing I would say.
And it's interesting for me that you mentioned that you're starting to televise stormwater, your storm sewer system, because we were in the kind of the same boat in Roseville. We were guessing, and we really hadn't, I would say, we really hadn't paid attention to our storm sewer system. We were getting to the point where we started getting sinkholes and outlets were falling off and this, that, and the other. And so, we started to budget to be much more proactive and intentional about televising, particularly our large pipes under county roads and things like that, where we thought we were more critical. But and it's amazing. We've been doing the sanitary side for so long, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, we should probably be doing the same thing at the storm sewer, right?
Oh yeah, that's where we're at, Mark. Maybe we just one step ahead of that, but not much. So.
Okay. And to wrap it up, any kind of hard lessons learned implementing any of this new technology stuff that kind of you'd like to pass on to others?
I guess I would say that don't be thin-skinned. My former boss, who I think the world of, would say, Russ, I don't want to go and be paying for somebody's utility expenses that they're not even born yet. I don't want to do that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Now, I never said, well, before you came to town, guess what? A lot of other folks paid for all the trunk improvements so that you could get water. And the sewer could leave from your home. But, I guess there's resources out there. I'll give another plug for APWA and and our asset management committee, and we're trying to do stuff. Go to the website. There's some really good stuff out there at a national level. But if you're in Minnesota, go through that group, and we can give you some good guidance on where to go and where not to go. But I guess be for what I'm experiencing, and I think the world of all the Eagan staff we work with, but it's different. It's still a different idea, and so be patient.
Okay.
But keep at it, because honestly, this is I don't mean to end on a sour note, but I honestly see, and I'll use Minnesota as an example, but smaller communities, outstate communities that have a lot of the utility systems they currently have, or maybe a result of the Clean Water Act. I'm thinking more of like sanitary sewer treatment facilities and stuff. Well, man, they're 50, 60 years old now, and they haven't established any funding to, let alone keep up with repairs, let alone other than replace, those systems. I honestly, and I don't want to speak doom and gloom, but I think there's communities out there that we love going to, whether it's a place we stop to go hunting or in the wintertime or whatnot, that may not be there in another 20, 30 years because they can't afford to be.
Right.
And I had this conversation with somebody else who's more familiar with the metro area, and they said, Russ, that's going to happen on the outskirts of the metro area. There's going to be communities like that as well. And so, so for me, what motivates me is trying to have, quality of life be sustained for into perpetuity, for Eagan and the other communities, but to try and start planning as soon as we can, to start setting aside money so we can pay for these future expenses that are coming.
Yeah. And there are some states, and I know we keep extending this episode here, but there are some states that actually mandate an asset management plan. And Minnesota doesn't do that yet, but maybe there needs to be some more talk about at least some best practices and some things like that, or some certifications or something, in order to really push that in some of these smaller communities.
Mark, I had some conversations with a couple House committees this spring.
Yep.
And I don't know if a proposal's gone forward, but one of the chairs was looking at proposing. Michigan has something like this where they've got a state, I don't know it grew as it literally was like 3 staff people, and they had the right to use transportation staff and others. But to actually have an asset management council, I guess maybe I'll use that term, and establishing that to help start, you know, looking out and encouraging communities or agencies, you know, being someone who's going to kind of be an advocate for financing for those needed and future improvements.
It's funny. I read an article in the Star Tribune yesterday about the St. Anthony Falls Dam and how it was built in 1876, and no one knows what the condition of it is, and no one's taking responsibility for it, including the Corps of Engineers. And the article writer said, nothing gets politicians scurrying faster than mentioning the term asset management or asset management, you know, or infrastructure management, that type of thing. It's like they don't have any unless it's new infrastructure. They don't care about.
Well, right. I mean, that's the one thing we've heard from legislators is, well, nobody's talking about transportation funding. Well, why should they? They don't understand it. They don't really understand how if we don't start taking care of our roadways in 20 years, they're going to be. They're going to look like the ones in St. Paul. They're going to be gravel, you know.
And that actually going back to some of the other infrastructure, we have paved roads in kind of more rural areas that have 50, 100 cars a day. And at some point, who's going to pay to replace that pavement? Yeah. Or do we need to revert to gravel? Right. I mean, those are hard conversations to have, but you know, but we can't ignore them.
Yeah. Right. And it's hard to get attention to them because it's not sexy. You know, it's not some of these sexier policy items that they're dealing with, you know, at the legislature. It's not a ribbon cutting
ceremony around that.
It's not improving something. It's maintaining something. Well, John, anything else to add? Close up here? No, I think that covers it. We're probably over our time anyway.
Yeah, so that's okay. Thanks for this is awesome. Thanks, Russ. Thanks, John.
This is great. Great conversation. This is exactly what we want it to be. Is this conversation, and hopefully glean some technical information out of it at the same time. And as we fade out of this episode, I also want to give a shout out to our great producer back there, Tony, who's helping sets all the stuff up for us, gets it going, and make sure we sound and look good through this. So
thanks, Tony. At least sound good.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.